So Emmy Butlin is from the Julian Assange Defence Committee. She's a star, and she's been a WikiLeaks supporter for many years. She participated since 2012 in the Solidarity Vigil outside the Ecuadorian Embassy, as I think have several people in this room. She has is very active on Twitter as well. So I think, Emmy, you're going to really bring us up to date on the campaign and what's going on in the campaign, and that's a very important element we need to think about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
We've got a bit under 10. You're all right with that?
Okay, very brief. Thank you, first of all, to Helen Mercer, who organised this meeting, and for reaching out to the local people, the real people who live locally. Belmarsh is around the corner. You need to mobilise. I want to thank her for participating and advising our efforts, who have intensified after his arrest. And we're trying to push forward for his campaign on a grassroots level. This is where we operate, and this is where you come into play. I will speak about the Assange precedent that Jennifer Robinson mentioned in her video very briefly, and the threats to the media and activists and citizen journalists that the indictment poses, from the perspective that Julian Assange is one of us. What do I mean by that? We often, again and again, hear that media is under threat, that press freedom is under threat. The difference is that Julian Assange is not a media baron. He is one of us. He started with very humble beginnings, as many people that know him will tell you. An intelligent man with a lot of skills, and he managed to, very much like a Renaissance man, use his brains, his intelligence, and his modest resources to do something very creative in with WikiLeaks, using his skills to create a Dropbox, anonymizing sources. He used that, and that is the difference between him and other media. So when we hear Jennifer Robinson talking about the Assange precedent, we have to consider that Julian Assange on WikiLeaks is not just like any other media, although it performs absolutely, very truthfully, the function of media and journalism. And the difference is he is not in cahoots with the state, let's put it plainly. He doesn't have powerful backers like the Barclays brothers in this country, like powerful trusts with $1 billion in the bank. So when we are talking about the Assange precedents, they have picked onto an organization that does not have a relationship, a client relationship with the establishment internationally. And they have picked this organization exactly because they want to crush media freedoms and change the way things were perceived here in the West. They've picked an organization with very little backing, an individual without a powerful backer, and they have unleashed a war against them. And this is where we are. The case against Assange is what's called an icebreaker to crush the rest of the press. So they focused on an organization and a human being that doesn't have a powerful establishment backer and protector in order to be the guinea pig if they remain defenseless, to change the law and then apply it internationally to other media organizations who, because they have a client relationship with the state and with the establishment, will comply. They will not resist. So this is how important the defense of Julian Assange is now by us, the people. Huge difference. You do not see the Guardian in the dock as yet. what they will do after the laws have changed internationally, they will negotiate as institutional players with the establishment and the states that they operate, of how they will operate. They will not resist. They have enough power to get by operating within the system. But creating the precedent is profoundly influential for our democracy, because they will be changing the laws, and then the law of the state will be the one that we will all have to operate. And in a time where the internet has given reason to independent media, has given reason to the citizen journalist, as we say, to where even individuals like myself can micro-publish in Twitter via tweets. I don't know how long I'll be able to continue to do that with our current wave of suspensions. We become journalists. We publish. So the laws of publishing will affect the citizenry profoundly and at huge scale. And that is why the defense of WikiLeaks and the defense of Julian Assange now by us is extremely important for our human rights and our democratic processes. Extraterritoriality. I won't go into detail, but it's pretty clear that the United States wishes to apply its US laws above and outside its own territory globally. And again, they used Julian Assange and his case in order to impose that. And it's a kind of a deregulation of sovereignty in that respect, that they legalize the rendition, as mentioned, of people on that basis. Other publishers might be affected, the Guardian, the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, the Iraq Body Count, but also, as I said, it includes bloggers, activists, NGOs, free press groups, charities who operate and publish things. Goodness knows you might publish something that under the new laws will be against the national interest or against national defense. We do not know how they're going to cook the laws up. Very important to note what Mike Pompeo mentioned when he was the CIA director. Julian Assange is not a US citizen, has no First Amendment privileges. Remember, he didn't use the word rights. He views First Amendment as a privilege bestowed to whom? We are human. We are talking about human rights, freedom of expression, freedom of the press as a human right to communicate and express yourself. And this, we might think it affects only media and large corporations. No, it affects us as people. And Julian Assange is one of us. He has faced tremendous backlash for his work and for challenging his authority with his work. And it started with him as a person and spread to his organization. And I'll bring one example. When Julian Assange was in Sweden in the summer of 2010, his bank accounts were frozen. Imagine not being able to go and get any money. He was in a foreign country, friendless. Yes, he had associates. Yes, he was invited, but he had absolutely no funds of his own, suddenly, and no means of getting any money. Oh, you might have think, oh, it was a fluke. No, it was on purpose. He was refused his rights to spend his own money on the basis of his activities, his journalistic activities. Several months later, in the autumn of that year, when I went to do a small donation to WikiLeaks, I was no longer able to use PayPal to do so. Neither was I able to use my bank card, credit card, or any card. Western Union, Visa, MasterCard, all blocked donations to WikiLeaks. The war was direct and from the very beginning. And it spread over to the politicization of the Swedish case, which created a legal quagmire, keeping Julian Assange trapped into legal trouble, which is where eventually ended up in Belmarsh. The constant state of denial of human rights to Julian Assange like the lack of recognition of political asylum, the fact that this country, the UK, has the grave responsibility if in deciding not to grant safe passage, deciding not to recognize the political asylum, deciding not to recognize the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention ruling that deemed his arrest arbitrary according to international law. They chose to ignore it. Our politicians, our elected government, chose to ignore it. They chose to ignore it. Even the United Rapporteur on Torture, Niels Melzer, report that Julian Assange has suffered psychological torture over a long period of time. And he has also suffered from surveillance, violation of his privacy. Metropolitan Police did it. US Global did it. The private contractor who's supposed to be guarding the Ecuadorian embassy. There is today's news. Spanish security company spied on Julian Assange in London for the United States. And the praise smears persisted and persisted and persisted, first on a personal level and then against WikiLeaks. But finally, what can we do as campaigners? I will tell you very briefly what we've been doing. And if you could emulate that or have any ideas, that would be marvelous. We organize monthly rallies. We go to Westminster and protest there at Parliament Square, where a lot of the politicians can see us and hear our voices of protest. We go to Trafalgar Square, we go to Belmarsh on Solidarity Vigil and rallies to bring public attention. We correct the record, write to the BBC, the Telegraph, to the Mirror. We try very, very hard when we see the smears appearing to try to address those by writing, using their own complaints procedure, and publish the results when we are successful or not, escalating to IPSO, who are supposed to regulate the press standards in this country. We mobilize to educate politicians by writing to our members of parliament. We have every right to do so, and there are several leaflets in the entrance with a standard letter. Please take some on your way out. And we finally organize by forming committees and groups, and please join us in this journey. And this is where I end. Thank you very much.